Hello and welcome to this video on market failure. In this video, we're going to look at what is meant by market failure and then also illustrate the concept using some examples. So an economic system is the process by which scarce resources are transformed by businesses and firms into products, goods and services that you and I want to consume. And we have various different choices about how we make this allocation. We have looked at three economic systems: a free market economy where resources are allocated by demand and supply and the price mechanism, a mixed economy where resources are partly allocated by the market and partly by the government, and a command economy where resources are allocated by the government. Now, we are most familiar with the free market economy and the mixed economy. But this leads us to making a bit of a decision. On what basis should we use the free market economy, and actually when should governments be involved in this allocation and decision-making process? Well, let's quickly remind ourselves of what the characteristics of a free market are. A free market is where the interactions of demand and supply determine the price and the quantity at which exchanges take place. So the price mechanism serves to make the allocation, serves as a signal as to what society wants, and also creates an incentive for people to try their best. And so we would say the price mechanism is the way in which resources are allocated in a free market. But how do we know that using the free market is the best outcome or the best choice of allocation method for a particular good or service? Well, as economists, we would judge it in two ways. We would look at the efficiency of the outcome, and we would also look at the equitable nature or the fairness of the distribution of resources in society. And using these two approaches, we would judge whether we think actually the free market is the best method through which to allocate these resources. And if not, then maybe we need some government intervention. So when we talk about efficiency of markets, is the outcome that we get from using the free market efficient? We can talk about it in terms of productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. Productive efficiency, the outcome is productively efficient if the goods and services are produced using the fewest resources, i.e. at the lowest cost in terms of land, labour, capital, etc. If the free market gives us this outcome, we would say it's productively efficient. Second type of efficiency is allocative efficiency. And we would say allocative efficiency is where resources are distributed in such a way that society really gets what it wants, i.e. no consumer could be better off without someone else becoming worse off. So society's wants for goods and services are being met. The choices that are being made about what to produce meet society's demands. We would say if that's the outcome of the free market, then we would say it's allocatively efficient. So let's think about markets and efficiency. Why would actually we expect markets to give us an efficient outcome? Well, competitive free markets often lead to an efficient allocation of resources. In a market with many buyers and sellers, competition amongst the sellers forces producers to produce at the lowest cost. If they don't do that, if they don't produce at the lowest cost, consumers are free to go to another seller and buy from them. So we would expect markets through this process of competition to create productive efficiency. Markets also tend towards allocative efficiency as well, as consumers are able to cast their, if you like, their money is like a spending vote in the market. By spending my money on this particular thing, I'm saying that it's what I want, therefore the distribution, the choice to make that particular good or service has met my needs, and so the result here is allocatively efficient. Okay, so let's do a little thought experiment to see if we feel that the free market is the most appropriate mechanism by which to allocate bread, loaves of bread. So let's think about this first of all from a productively efficient outcome. Is using the free market and a market mechanism going to give us a good outcome in terms of operating at the lowest cost? Well, is there an incentive for producers of bread to minimize their costs and produce at the lowest possible cost? Well, yes, there clearly is, because there are many producers of bread, many different sellers, and if they don't produce at the lowest possible cost, then the customer, the buyer, is going to go elsewhere. So we would expect here that the market approach is quite good in terms of productive efficiency for allocating bread, because there's a clear incentive here for the sellers to do it at the lowest cost, otherwise customers will go elsewhere. Let's now think about allocative efficiency. Is the distribution of bread within society going to meet customers' wants and needs? Well, how do we distribute things using the market mechanism? It's distributed through the price mechanism. So if you pay the price, you get allocated the product. And if we have a look at how this works for bread, if you pay the price for bread, then you receive the bread. It's not distributed at random, it's not allocated by the government. If you pay the price, you're indicating that you want it, and you can be allocated that resource. Now, if we look at this distribution, the allocative efficiency of bread manufacturing, do we as economists have any issues with this? Are we saying the distribution of bread is not satisfactory within our society? Probably not. It's probably a good way of allocating the resource here, because if you pay the price, you get the bread. If you don't value it as much, you don't spend the money and you don't get the bread. Then lastly, let's have a look and see, do we think it's fair? Well, if we look at the distribution of bread in society, do we think that's a fair distribution? Do those people who really want bread get it? Do those people who need bread get it? And on the whole, I think, again, we would say yes, that we have no problems here with the distribution of bread within our society. So it ticks all our boxes: productively efficient, allocatively efficient, and we would say the outcome is equitable. So we have no issues with bread being distributed by the price mechanism using a free market approach. However, sometimes the outcome that we get from the market is not desirable or is not very efficient. And where that exists, we would say, rather than the free market working, we have market failure. And market failure is where resources are inefficiently allocated due to imperfections in the working of the market mechanism. So something has gone wrong here with using the market to allocate this resource, and the outcome is not desirable, not efficient from society's perspective. We might be productive inefficiency, where they're not being produced at their lowest cost, or there might be allocative inefficiency, where the goods being produced are not consistent with society's wants and needs. So this definition of market failure is an important one. Let's make sure we get it down in our notes. So some goods or services may not be produced at all, and we would say there's been a market failure. The market hasn't actually produced this good or service. There's been a missing market. Some goods may be overproduced. There's too much being produced by the market, or some goods or services may be underproduced. There's not really enough being produced from society's perspective. And there are a number of reasons why markets might fail, and we're going to look at these in some of the next videos. So let's imagine that there was a free market. There was no government intervention, no government involvement in the provision of the following goods and services. On what basis might we say that actually the outcome, if there was a free market approach for these goods and services, might not be very effective or desirable, and actually the market might fail us in providing these goods and services? Let's start in the top left with the army. Let's imagine that actually the government didn't provide the army. It was left to buyers and sellers in the marketplace. So if you wanted to be protected, you were a buyer of that service, you'd have to pay. If you were a seller, you would be a soldier and you'd be offering a particular service. Now let's imagine that with an army. If everyone in a particular country, it was left to buyers to choose to pay for the service, well, if I paid, how could I stop my neighbour who maybe hasn't paid from benefiting from that service? Are the army going to say, right, well, this country can invade, you can't attack this person because they paid for it, but you can attack this person because they haven't? It just doesn't work. And because if my neighbour's not paying and getting the benefit of the service I'm providing, then why should I pay? And if I don't pay, my neighbour doesn't pay, this service is not going to be provided at all. So if it was left just a free market approach to provide the army, we will probably have a missing market. Let's have a think about education now. If it was just left to buyers and sellers in the marketplace, we would have buyers, presumably parents, who would pay for education for their children, and we would have sellers, private schools, and we know that these exist already. But let's have a look at the outcome. We would get a situation where perhaps some very poor parents wouldn't be able to pay the price to access that resource. Now, is that equitable? Is that fair on the child? Is that what we want from society's perspective? In this situation, we might get an under-provision of education. We might get too little education, and some people not having an education because they can't afford the price. So the free market here might again fail us. A similar story with housing in the bottom right hand corner. We might have a situation where some people can't afford the price of the housing in the marketplace and so don't get a house. And what's the alternative there? Well, being homeless. Is this a desirable outcome from society's point of view, perspective? No, it's not desirable. So again, if it was just down to purely the free market to allocate this resource, we would probably say it's not likely to give us the best possible outcome. Likewise, vaccinations. If it's just down to private individuals, buyers and sellers to negotiate, we might get some people who are willing to pay the price for a vaccination. We might get others who are not. And so we'd have some proportion of the population that are vaccinated and some proportion of the population that aren't vaccinated. And those who aren't vaccinated will keep that virus going, and we can never really get rid of that virus. So again, it doesn't really work here, the free market. The outcome is not going to be desirable. The virus will continue. What we really need is a mass approach, maybe funded by the government, coordinated by the government, to get everybody vaccinated, and then the outcome is much more desirable from society's point of view. So we can see in a few of these examples here, some goods or services, if we just left it to the free market, to buyers and sellers, then the outcome wouldn't necessarily be efficient. It might not happen at all, or it might be undesirable. There might be less being produced than we would like from society's point of view. So in this video, we've looked at what is meant by market failure, and we've also looked at the concept of market failure using some examples. That's it. Thanks for listening.